Session here. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining. My name is Rami Lotam with the FedEx Institute of Technology. I'm a project manager here in charge of our programming for both community outreach, workforce development, and tech research training. One of our partnerships is here with Blockchain901, represented by Christine Fahey. And through this series, we've been able to highlight a lot of the emerging trends in blockchain technology and then different companies and different avenues. Our speaker today is with a startup company called DexFreight, and his name is Rajat. I'm not going to butcher his last name, so we'll just call him by his first name and let him introduce himself a little bit. And then if you have any questions, please feel free to post those in the chat box at the bottom of the box, at the bottom of the page, and we'll be able to review those along with our recording, which will be posted on the webpage posted in the chat box periodically here through this session. With that, Rajat, please take it away.
All right, thank you, Rami, and thanks for the invite. I'm going to turn off my video so I don't get kicked out of the hotel Wi-Fi. Again, thank you for inviting, and Kristen has been a big follower, so thank you, Kristen, for arranging all of this. I'm very familiar with FIT. I've talked to people over there for several years. So very happy to be here. So I'm going to talk about what is DexFreight, what are we doing in terms of building blockchain-enabled protocol and platform. So both Web 2 and Web 3. Web3 applications in the ecosystem, and in general, talk about the technology components that we piece together, as well as some progress. We're also doing crowdfunding, so just touch on different topics. I'll probably finish in like 15-20 minutes, and I'll just open up for questions. If you have more questions, feel free to hit me up in LinkedIn. I'll provide my email address at the end of the slide, so you'll have that if you have more questions. Hold on. All right, so just a disclaimer, since we're doing crowdfunding, so basically what I'm going to talk about is all educational purpose only. It's not an investment advice. Okay. Just about me, I'm a co-founder of DexFreight. We started the company in late 2018. I also work as a working group lead at Mobility Open Blockchain Initiative, which is a consortium of automotive companies like BMW, Ford, GM, Honda, Hitachi, suppliers like Denso, AWS. AWS has a big automotive practice. USA, which is an insurance company based out of Texas. So I help them kind of coordinate adoption of blockchain and various aspects, various use cases within the mobility sector. Before that, I was a research engineer at Texas A&M University for 13 years. So all in all, I've been in this mobility and space for 15 plus years, and blockchain space for 4+ years. I just also published a book. It's available in Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, and the book came about. Was published last year, December last year, and the book is really for B2B minded entrepreneurs and executives. So it's a very grounded. It has a lot of grounded concepts on how to use blockchain in enterprise. So it's the thing I like to say is, like, it's not like Don Tapscott's book, which is a lot of pie in the sky blockchain will change the world kind of thing. And then also it doesn't also have a lot of code. It does have a lot of sketches about how certain aspects of the blockchain works. So it's a pretty good book. It's non-technical if you're interested. All right. So what is DexTrade? It's our mission is simplifying logistics for a better world. And we are doing two things, and I'll go through those, but just as a one-liner, we are a logistics fintech-enabled marketplace and platform for full truckload drayage in US, and soon we'll be launching in South America. So that's our proprietary business layer, if you will, on top of the blockchain infrastructure. Sorry. And then at the same time, we're also building open logistics protocol, which we call a common utility, common infrastructure for the industry. And I'm going to talk mostly about open logistics protocol because we have not published this. We may have talked a couple of times, but we're in a position now that we can publish some of the protocol components, and we actually had a couple of meetings in this month and last month. We're onboarding 4 or 5 logistics companies, freight logistics technology companies, to bring them on top of the protocol as a common backend. So I'll talk about that. It's like a consortium, consortium backend. So why do you need a protocol like that? If you're familiar with the logistics industry, it's extremely fragmented. You have 17,000 brokers and 3.5 million something carriers and 6 million shippers, and we know that logistics has its own kind of workflow that separates from your production workflow or your financial workflow, and manufacturing workflow, and every stakeholder that you see on the top with those boxes, they use their own systems, and the name of the game is whoever is connected to each other with those one-off integrations is kind of be kind of seen as a front runner, but in reality, you have the shipper that sends shipment information to a third-party logistic, be a 4PL as well. And the 4PL has its own system, shipper has its own system, and then it sends information to the carrier with the shipment information. Carrier may have its own system, but if it's a small carrier, it may not have any system at all. And so they do the bidding process and rate negotiations and contracts and whatnot. Then goes into consignee, books the shipment, moves those shipments, and so what we see here is those red arrows. So those red arrows is what we call like a gaps, kind of a data gap. So for example, on the first red bracket, you see the information going from shipper to 3PL1, and then the 3PL1 basically takes that information and then sends it to 3PL2. So there's obviously a gap as to the shipper actually doesn't know what is happening, right? So the shipper doesn't know that the 3PL1 is sending information to 3PL2. So in general, there's a huge visibility problem in logistics about where is the data going along with the actual physical movement of the goods. And so this has created need for a lot of one-off integrations. There are tons of companies, all they do all day long is integrations, and they're getting a lot of attention from investors. And we think that that's not the best way to move the industry forward. If you look at industries like banking and airlines and other fintech industries, even telecom industries, they've done a really good job of creating what they call a common backend, a common utility infrastructure to exactly reduce this kind of one-off integrations. And in logistics, we don't have that, and so that's what we're trying to build. and bring logistics companies and freight tech companies into that common backend. And they can still do their business. They can still create their proprietary application layer, but they'll be sharing information depending on the use case. So I'm going to talk about that as well. So basically, there are lots of one-off integrations with between TMSs, with TMS and fleet management system, ELDs, and GPS providers. So if you look at old business models, old common infrastructure, the Visa, Swift, Amadeus, Sabre. Visa was initially started by a Bank of America to be a sort of a common backend for credit cards. Swift was also created by a bunch of banks. It's still in operations. They move like $5 trillion a day, but it's actually almost like they operate the common backend for hundreds and thousands of banks all over the world, and all they do is identity, right? They're not actually taking the money and sending it to somebody else. All they do is their infrastructure is really designed for identification. Amadeus is another example. It's a private company now, and they do backend integrations of airlines. It was started by American Airlines, and companies like Hotwire and Expedia. All they do is they don't go to each airlines to do integrations. All they do is connect to Amadeus, and you get information on various seat availability ratings from price from the airlines directly. So the other industries have done really well in terms of creating this common utility infrastructure, which doesn't exist in logistics. So you see that there's because of blockchain, we've seen these common utility infrastructure become more and more common. And Bitcoin, Ethereum, you can see them as an infrastructure, not only as a crypto project, but really as an infrastructure. There are side chains coming out, there are DAOs coming out, there are lots of protocols, ERC20 tokens, and all of them really use the backend infrastructure. So that's from a B2C side. The B2B side is also very quickly evolving. We're all familiar with TradeLens project, IBM and Maersk. MEF is another consortium of network industries, network and telecom industries. Mobi is automobile, and we're also, Dexrate is also building that sort of B2B common utility infrastructure to reduce this one-off integrations. And one of the cool things about all this is you reduce one-off integrations, but that allows creation of new business models that didn't exist before. And if you go back and look at what Swift did, Swift was not able to only connect different banks, but it allowed supply chain, cross-border international supply chain to really take off, which would not have been possible if there were no entity like Swift. So the benefits of this common utility backend is twofold. One is it'll improve existing workflow across the industry, right? Reduce one-off integrations, and also standardize a lot of things between the companies. Standardizing rate confirmation seeds, rate confirmation documents, the contracts between carriers and brokers and shippers. It'll help standardize identity and reputation. Like in logistics, there's identities, mostly the government provided MC numbers and USD2 numbers. Reputation is mostly related to safety, but there's no operational reputation within the industry. And also provides, because it doesn't require one-off integrations, it also helps companies expand their shipment and capacity search capabilities. So you're not restricted to your own if you're posting your shipment in load boards, you're not restricted to that. You can now expand beyond your silos, and hopefully it'll create new business opportunities. And that's something that we're really interested in. That's what we're working on and excited about. Is using one example is using inexpensive and programmable liquidity using decentralized finance pools. And most likely there will be more use cases that will come out of this common utility. For example, transparent bundling of partial shipments. Okay, so we came up with this architecture, and surprisingly, the other B2B consortium, blockchain-based consortium, have very similar architecture. So I'm working with Mobi. They have a very similar architecture like this, and it's a lot of abstraction. So in the bottom you have the common utility layer, and that could include various core services. And in our case, we have identity and reputation as two of the core services. There could be more. It depends on the industry, obviously. And core services are nothing but a bunch of smart contracts, right? The smart contracts, there's a template, and then everybody agrees to basically use that template. And you can layer that with tokens and off-chain, on-chain governance, and all of those things. And what we've seen with what we're building, and Mobi and MEF and CBAN and other types of B2B consortium architectures, like they're all trying to leverage existing standards. And if those existing standards do not exist, then you build your own new standards. So one of the standards that's being widely used is W3C's decentralized ID and verifiable credential standards for identification that generally works in the blockchain infrastructure. Right? So you cannot use MC number or your tax ID number in the blockchain infrastructure. It has to be DIDs. And now, how do you use that in enterprise setting is a different topic. It's quite interesting. And so you have the common utility layer on the bottom, and then you have your proprietary business layer on the top, right? So in our case, it's the shippers, carriers, 3PLs, freight forwarders, and we have our own TextFreight 2.0, like Web 2.0 business layer, where we do the matching and booking and payment and machine learning algorithms and things like that. But we also allow, and that's the whole point of having a common utility layer, is you allow other companies to come in and use the layer, but they have their own proprietary things. But now, instead of doing an integration between DexFreight and these other companies, then we just go through the common utility layer to participate in common identity and common reputation framework. But obviously the layer, the common utility layer, the protocol, obviously needs tokens for incentives and governance to make sure that the token is the protocol is sustainable over time. The interesting thing about it is, like, this is the best architecture that's available at this point. Over time this will change, and there are lots of different flavors. So we're using RSK and Ethereum as our infrastructure, and then Mobi is using Hyperledger. Some other consortium are using Tezos and Cardano and all of those things. So there are different flavors, with the overall architecture is kind of very similar. So this is our proprietary business, our DexFreight Web 2.0 layer, right? So we have, we get shipments from brokers and load boards. We show them in maps. We allow the carriers to search them and book those shipments. We have a mobile app. So there are various features of that business. So our core Web 2 business is shipment processing from booking to payment, and a little bit as well as to dispatch. So we have a marketplace for loads and trucks. So we get loads from various sources. We get trucks from trucking companies. They're either putting that information manually or through file uploads, also through ELD integrations. Then they can do negotiation contracts, sign the contracts, and issue payments. So we also connect their bank accounts to facilitate the payment. And we do this for full truckload and trailers. So we're not there in LTL. They're all ground shipments at this point. So we have, all of this is Web 2.0. We have our own backend, and it actually uses the smart contracts that's in the protocol layer. So we're actually the first, let's say, the first user of that protocol. So now our second task is to bring more users, more companies on top of the protocol. So one of the products that we're building, or we build, is what we call DexFi, which is kind of alternative to factoring. And so a lot of small trucking companies use factoring to take care of their short-term cash flow issues. And so we've in the platform, they can request what we call next day payment. And this is available to the brokers. So what the brokers will do is they'll negotiate with the carrier, say, hey, you're getting next day payment. Can you give us a discount on this and that shipment? And so the carriers will say, okay, we'll give you a discount. So essentially, we charge, Dextra charges 2%, 2% fee to whoever is getting the payment. So essentially, we as Dextra provide liquidity from our own pool. So we have a special purpose vehicle that has its own bank account and has a pool fund there with a couple of LPs. And so we fund those transactions. Now it's obviously a bit of a manual process, and we're building some tools that will allow us to kind of scale it. And those tools are very traditional in the sense of any lending agency would have to use, which is to look at the company's credit history, whether they can pay back or not. There are lots of companies who provide this credit history information, risk scores. To do KYC, we have to look at whether we what kind of loan to value do we provide? Is 80%, 70%, 90%? Also, brokers are by law required to have surety bonds. So if something happens, the broker doesn't pay, then we should be able to tap into the surety bonds and make claims. So all of these risk management process is something we'll need to have, whether we use kind of traditional method of providing liquidity, or whether we do a true DeFi payment using by tokenizing invoices, right? And that's where we just filed a patent for it. And the idea on that one is every time an invoice is created for a shipment, it goes into smart contract, obviously, and then we turn that into an NFT, ERC 721, and then those tokens are then used as collateral to borrow funds from DeFi pools. So we have a bunch of options here. One is Aave on RSK, and then the option 2 is Maker on Ethereum. And this landscape is changing quite a bit. The Maker and Ethereum pools the DeFi pools over there are quite volatile. So we're also looking at what could be those pools that are not that volatile. And a lot of these pools are actually looking to add non-crypto assets, right? So in our case, an invoice is a non-crypto asset, and it's quite stable. So most of these DeFi pools use crypto, and we all know that the prices fluctuate so much. So we have that, and we're finishing that up We have a few more steps to go, and we should be able to release that quite soon. And one of the good things about lending is that it's an unregulated market, right? So basically, since we're taking all the risk, we don't have to have any regulatory body looking over us. So that's a good good sign. So we don't have to worry about a lot of compliance issues. It's mostly being able to manage our own risk. But what we've seen so far with the DexFi, 40 or 45% of our shipments are actually we provide liquidity. And mostly small trucking companies love it because they get paid quickly and they don't have to wait for 30, 45 days, and they get their cash flow in the bank account in a day or two after they've delivered the shipment at a very low interest rate. So this is a quite popular, and so we've been in kind of a stealth mode. We've been doing like a kind of organic growth. And we've got about 2,700. This is an old KPI. We've got about 2,700 companies and 500 shippers, 900 something brokers. We've reached like I think 1,800 carriers now. A lot of those carriers are brought in by the brokers. And we've got about 600, 700 carriers that have done at least one booking. And we've processed about $2.6 million shipments for the past couple of months. And top line revenue is 300 something dollars. It's mostly from our DexFi product. So one of the reasons we are doing crowdfunding is now we believe we're ready to scale up our operations, right? So at the same time, we've been approached by a couple of companies outside of US to saying that, hey, we like your product, we like your platform, we like what you're doing, and a lot of these countries don't have a lot of digitization, so they're saying, hey, we want to launch your product in Mexico, Colombia, and whatnot. So we had a couple of meetings this week, and there will be some announcements coming soon about pilots. So watch out for that. And we're pretty excited about those too, because it's almost like a greenfield opportunity over there. And here it's a lot of competition. So on that architecture I talked about, if you kind of zoom in what those architecture looks like and what are the components. So there's about 4 layers. The bottom 3 layers is the architecture, the backend layer. So we've got peer-to-peer layer where any two company can connect and share like load information or capacity information. There's the smart contract layer, which is essentially the core services. So we have identity contract, node registry contract, document hub, reputation contracts. We're working on escrow payment contracts. So a lot of these are contracts written in Solidity. And finally, we have the main blockchain ledger infrastructure, which is Ethereum and Coven and Rootstock and mainnet. And the most important part is the top layer, which is the application layer or business layer or Web 2, or I call it. So we have our own web API for brokers and carriers, as well as shippers, and then the mobile app. We're working on creating like a custodial wallet for the companies. A lot of companies, especially small trucking companies, don't want to deal with keys and wallets and all that. So we're working on building like an inbuilt wallet, and we're also doing integrations. That's kind of an unfortunate part. It's expensive, it's messy, and we don't like to do it, but we have to do it, right? Let's see what else. So these are the contracts that's been deployed. Node registry identity. So basically, node registry contract is all the participants, all the companies can run their own nodes, and as soon as they run the node, they become they become part of the network, and then they can activate the P2P layer to share information. So the second phase of this whole protocol is the protocol sustainability as to how to sustain this protocol. Where our plan is to separate the protocol from DexFreight Inc., which is essential because we want the protocol to be owned by the members and the token holders, obviously. And so we're building a model whereby we can look at how to make this protocols sustainable over time with fees and service and rewards. All done will have to be done through tokens. So there's a tremendous opportunity to work on this. So we're just beginning. We're still talking with a couple of lawyers about how to do this without getting into SEC's radar. So as you all know, SEC is kind of ramping up their effort on regulating DeFi, and even they've shut down ICOs. ShipChain was a pretty popular ICO that started at the same time as us. They were in a similar logistics business, and they raised 25 million, and they had to be shut down. And we didn't do the ICO, thankfully. Otherwise, we would have been in the chopping block as well. So, like I said, our DexFreight Inc. as a company, as a Delaware C Corp, is we see three things that needs to be done. We obviously need to educate the industry for the common utility and what's the benefit and what are the value propositions that it brings to the table. Obviously, we'll lead the protocol development and participate in its governance until it reaches a sort of level of decentralization that we want to. Next steps. So we're formalizing the founding members. We have about 5 or 6 companies. We have a couple of meetings, so we're going to formalize that. All of our protocol codes in GitHub repo. So we'll open those codes for the members to run nodes and open APIs and share information. We're also going to start doing the processing of shipments. So it'd be like a multi-party shipment processing. We're talking with lawyers about how to do this in a clean regulated way, and that is very much related to how do we release those tokens without getting into SEC's radar. So we're having all these discussions. We're making a good progress. We made a good progress in the last couple of months. So we'll need your help. So that's my ask for today is, I'd like you to kind of take this idea home. You're in Memphis, so you're surrounded by logistics companies and freight tech companies. So help us introduce this concept to more stakeholders, and obviously support us with traditional funding. We're not doing an ICO at this point, so we don't have that luxury of raising $20-30 million the way the ICOs did. And if you're also interested in the space from a legal aspect, that would be great. We've talked to a couple of lawyers, and obviously they're expensive, but we also have seen some, the interest from lawyers who are interested in getting into this space, because it's still a very much a greenfield space in terms of legal. All right, so that's all I have today. My email is up there. My LinkedIn handle is up there. We're doing fundraising through Start Engine. If you're interested, you're more than welcome to support us. We will be thankful forever. So with that, I'd like to close my presentation. Any questions, comments?
Thank you, Rajat. That was very, very informative. Yeah, if you do have any questions, please make sure you can enter them in the chat function or unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hey, Rajat, I have a question. This is Christine.
Mhm.
I know you're talking about monetizing data for the stakeholders involved. I just think it's really interesting. So can you give a little more information about that, or like, and
Yeah.
yeah.
So
Mhm.
sorry. Yeah. So there's a couple of ways to do that. One is so one way is we've started talking with like TMSs and ELDs, ELD aggregators, and obviously they're sitting on huge pile of data, and they don't know what to do with it. And we've talked to one TMS, and they have about 600 brokers they use, that use the TMS. So they have a huge pile of data. And we asked them, hey, can you give us the data? Can you sell us the data? And they're like, okay, but I don't know how to price it, right? So so we're thinking about using some kind of staking mechanism, some kind of token mechanism. There are a bunch of data marketplaces like Ocean, which does like data pools to do the price discovery. So that's, I mean, that's one way. The other way is just using data as an incentive. So you give me some data, I'll give you something back, and that could be a that could be done through the contract, a contract, or a series of contracts in the core services. So we could add we could allow these member companies to sort of exchange data through through a contract that's kind of visible to everybody. But obviously they'll have to find a way to kind of package the data in a way that it doesn't reveal you know, confidential information about their customer's identity and things like that.
Yeah, thank you. That was really interesting.
Yeah, it looks like there was a question in the chat from Denise asking, how does each member of the chain have benefit on the business model? Do they monetize, question mark?
Yeah, so as they become a node participant, they so for example, there's a, so we talked with a like a, I don't want to release the names, but what they do is they have a lot of truck drivers, small trucking companies in their platform, and a lot of other TMSs. They're all trying to connect to them. So this becomes a way to provide the visibility of those trucking companies to many other TMSs and marketplaces that's, you know, that's not connected at this point. So what they were saying is like, yeah, if it's connected, I'll charge them. You know, I'm charging them $50 per month per company, per seat. Now I can expand, you know, their visibility to even more, so I can charge them more, right? Because their trucks are now more visible to different platforms that are part of the network. So that's one way to monetize. And obviously they can always come in and build different products. Like they can build their own, you know, factoring service for they can bring their own, you know, identity services and reputation services and say, hey, we provide this service and we'll charge you an additional $10, something like that. So there's lots of ways that they can monetize.
All right, and it looks like there's one, we'll be able to take one last question. It says, since there's a lot of, looks like Vivek asked, since there is a lot of volatility in crypto prices, how are you considering its impact on the transaction cost?
Yeah, very good question. So right now we're on Kovan, which is a test net, so we're not worried about the transaction cost at this point. So we're also partners with RSK. They're actual investors as well, and they're a sidechain on Bitcoin. And so as a sidechain, the transaction cost is kind of distributed across different transactions. So we're not the only one paying for a transaction, because it's almost like a roll-up, like the roll-up of transactions. So that cost is still very low. If we do go to, let's say, Ethereum 1.0, yes, there will be a big cost, but there are other sidechains in layer 2 like Polygon, and others coming up, who's really their business model and their value proposition is, hey, we do roll up of transactions, so you don't end up paying $300 when you deploy a smart contract. So we're thankfully those Polygon came to market. So we were really worried about having to deploy a smart contract and pay like $400 every time we do it. So these sidechains are really saving a lot of cost to us. Yeah, are they volatile? Yes, but it's like when you deploy the smart contract, it's not like you have to deploy every time, right? So. And if it costs like, I don't know, $50 to smart contract, we can always distribute that cost over to multiple hundreds of transactions.
Great. Excuse me. Thank you. Great response. If there are no other questions, I think we'll go ahead and end our session here. Our session or this recording will be posted online on our FIT blockchain page, Blockchain901 page. I'll post it in the chat one more time before we sign off. But thanks everyone for joining, and we look forward to seeing you at our next session.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rajat. Thanks, Christine.
Thank you, Rajat.
Thank you, Christine. Bye. Thank you, Rami.
Thanks. Bye-bye.